What's up guys, it's James here, and in today's video we're going to be reacting to a video that honestly nobody saw coming from Shelby Church. Why she's quitting Airbnb. For those of you that have been following the channel for any length of time and have seen the other videos that Shelby has posted and those videos that I've reacted to, you'll know that frankly this really doesn't come as any kind of a surprise to me that she's quitting Airbnb. In fact, I think it's a ways overdue, and I want to react to this video because I think there's going to be some really great takeaway for any existing or prospective Airbnb and short-term rental investors out there. This is actually just a really cool thing to be able to see on YouTube, because this is exactly the typical journey of a lot of these opportunistic, uneducated investors that got into short-term rental investing when there was a whole bunch of opportunity, when the market was shooting up, and are now being forced to leave the market because they invested on really horrible fundamentals without doing any proper due diligence or analysis. And so investors like Shelby are exactly why there are really great buying opportunities in the market right now, is because a lot of those opportunistic investors that got in without doing due diligence, they're being forced to leave the market now because, you know, like the saying goes, you see who's swimming naked when the tide goes out, and the tide has started to go out, and that's where you start to see all these opportunities popping up. So let's jump right in and let's dive right into the video.
You saw the title right. I'm quitting Airbnb. No, it's not clickbait. It just doesn't make sense anymore. So today I'll get into why I'm quitting, what the last straw was for me, and what I'm planning on doing with this house now. As you guys know, hosting on Airbnb wasn't as profitable as I expected, but it was a generally good experience. But something changed recently, and it is the nail on the coffin for Airbnbs in California. It's a new bill that's introducing an additional 15% tax anytime you go to book an Airbnb in California. It's called SB 584, and they're rushing to get this into effect by 2025. So this is a big deal because anytime you go to book a hotel or a short-term rental, you're already taxed a transient occupancy tax, and it's usually around 10%. It's a little different in each city. You can see it's usually 10%. And this new unprecedented tax is on top of the transient occupancy tax. On its own, the TOT tax brings in a lot of money for Palm Springs. In 2023, it's estimated to be about $50 million. So hotels and short-term rentals bring in a ton of money for our city. It's the biggest revenue source. And additionally, Airbnbs are taxed on any profit that they make as well. So it's not like Airbnbs aren't paying taxes. But still, SB 584 is presenting a tax like I've never seen before, like higher than the TOT tax. That's kind of wild. So this is good news to a lot of people because I know a lot of you guys hate Airbnb. And I get it. The tax money is to go towards building affordable housing units. Currently, the city only spends $3 million of their budget.
Okay, so right off the bat, there's so much going on here. So first off, they're trying to get this implemented by 2025, she said. And it's late 2023, and that was the final straw why she's taking the property off of Airbnb. That doesn't add up. Why would you not just keep on making hay when the sun's shining? If things were actually going well, she would just wait until 2025 to take the property off of short-term rental. Why would she not, right? Obviously, there's more going on here, as is evident in her last videos, because she bought a horrible property in a bad location that costs like $1,000 a month or something ridiculous to heat the pool. Like she made every mistake in the book that there is if you're investing in short-term rental property. She didn't run the numbers on it. She didn't analyze it. She didn't do anything to figure out if it was a good investment or not. She didn't look into the regulations ahead of time. Like all of this stuff is comical, the level of mistakes that she's made. She's literally made all of them. So for anyone that's looking at this that's an investor or wants to be an investor, if you want to know what not to do, if you want to know the most common mistakes that you want to avoid, literally just watch her series on these videos, because she makes all of them. Like every common mistake. She overpaid for a property. She got a property she didn't analyze well. She didn't look at the expenses properly. Like she literally made all the mistakes in the book. She didn't look at regulations, all that, right? So I'm going to go on a limb here and say that this 15% tax that, by the way, is going to apply to every one of her competitors as well, is not the straw that broke the camel's back. This is just her reasoning of why she's leaving, but she's leaving because she, made a whole bunch of mistakes and did a really horrible job of it, and she's probably losing a lot of money renting this place as a short-term rental. So that makes sense. As far as the tax itself, or like what do you do if a new tax gets imposed in your area? Really nothing. You got to remember, again, like those taxes generally just get passed on to the end user. So you're just going to charge more for your listing because now you have more expenses. Everyone in the market had their expenses go up, so prices will go up. It's just like if they raise the minimum wage. It's not like if they raise the minimum wage, suddenly grocery stores start going out of business. No. Every grocery store has employees that are being paid minimum wage. If minimum wage goes up, your groceries get more expensive. Right? So if it were a tax that were specifically being applied to just her one property, sure, that would be really challenging. That would be probably devastating. But it's a tax that's being applied to everyone. The cost is going to get passed along to the end user. Prices are going to go up when that tax gets affected. And it's really not going to make any difference. And again, like if that's what actually ends up ruining your investment, it's only because your investment was hanging on by a thread to begin with. But again, I want to remind you guys, if we're watching this and we're being critical and we're actually thinking about this can't possibly be the reason why it's no longer profitable, because it hasn't even happened yet, right? She hasn't even seen what's going to happen when this thing gets affected. And so she's just making a preemptive call, which tells me, again, like it just doesn't make sense for her to be owning this property as a short-term rental property right now, let alone when there's a tax imposed, which is all well and good. I just think that, like, let's be transparent about it. You've been very honest so far about how horribly things are going. Let's not start cushioning the truth now.
On an affordable housing reserve, most of the money goes to general government and the police. It all sounds really great in theory, but will it actually work? And what am I gonna do with my house? Let's get into it. First, we need to look at how this affects if you were to book my house. Right now in November, it's kind of the slower season, so it's $575 a night. You end up paying $328 in taxes, so the reservation total is around $3,300. Now in 2025, when this whole thing goes into effect, it's gonna make it so that the taxes you pay are $749. So the total reservation goes from $3,300 to $3,745. The amount that you're paying in taxes is now more than the amount that you'd be paying for one night staying here. That's crazy. And the thing is, hotels don't have to enforce this tax. So whenever you go to California and stay in a hotel, you just pay the TOT tax, which is usually around 10%, depends on the city. So if you're a group of like 4 friends, I just don't see why you would ever stay in an Airbnb. It doesn't make sense. You're automatically gonna get a 15% discount by staying in a hotel. I mean, if I was looking to book a place in Palm Springs and I didn't own my house, I wouldn't book it. I would not book it if I had to pay 15% more. Like, are you crazy? Who would do that? Unless you absolutely need a house and you need the privacy, maybe you're like a 6-person group, but it just does not make sense. Keep in mind this.
Yeah, I mean, again, like if you're competing against hotels, yeah, I can see the argument here. But if you have a whole home listing with multiple bedrooms, you shouldn't be competing really with hotels. Like, to an extent you are, but it's two very different products, and you would have to be way more expensive than getting multiple hotel rooms as the alternative in order for it to not be beneficial. Like, anyone that's booking for a 4-person group would probably rather be in a whole home that has a swimming pool in the backyard, that's got privacy, that's got a kitchen, that's got a living room, dining room, than have 2 hotel rooms or have people sleeping on like a pull-out couch. Like, they're just not actually really comparable. And again, a lot of this comes back to, if that is the type of property she has where she is really directly competing with hotels, I mean, you just made a bad call. You just bought the wrong property. We already knew that. Like, that's not any new news here, because she didn't analyze the property. She didn't do her due diligence. She just bought a bad property. Is a bill that is being passed all across California. It's not just Palm Springs. So if you're ever going to book an Airbnb in San Diego in 2025, I mean, just look at hotels. Just don't even bother anymore. Honestly, that's my thoughts on it. So for me, this is the last straw. I think. Yeah, let's see how that works out. Let's see if that just shuts down the entire industry. If everyone just goes back to hotels now because of a 15% tax. Like, go on. I think it'll just make it too tough to compete with hotels. But I'm actually not selling my house. So again, all of this is her just pure speculation. Like she's speculating on what the impact of this tax is going to be, and she's just purely guessing and using anecdotal reasoning to say, well, I wouldn't book it if it were 15% more. But it's like, yeah, but you do pay more at the grocery store, minimum wage went up, and you're, like that's just not actually true, right? And if we look at other cities that have imposed taxes on short-term rental properties, what she's speculating is going to happen, which is like no one's going to travel in them anymore, is completely unsubstantiated. Like it's not actually backed up by the data. Guys, just want to take a quick break here to say that for those of you watching who want to build cash flow and long-term wealth by purchasing Airbnbs and short-term rental properties, there's a link in the description right down below for a free training that'll walk you through my exact strategy for investing successfully in Airbnbs. Now, if you're not ready to actually buy properties and you want to get started managing other people's properties on Airbnb, the same way I got started, and build a full-time income managing other people's properties, there's actually another free training linked in the description down below as well that'll be a really great fit for you. So whether you want to invest in short-term rental properties and actually build amazing cash flow and long-term wealth by acquiring the assets, buying the properties themselves, or you're looking to earn a full-time income managing other people's properties on Airbnb, we've got some awesome trainings that are linked in the description down below that'll definitely help you out. When you sign up for the trainings, we're also going to send you a few other tools and resources completely for free just to help you get started. Again, the links to sign up are in the description down below, and both trainings and all the tools are completely free. So make sure to register for the trainings, links in the description down below. And so again, if you want to be like a really speculative, like basically you're just like YOLOing your money into properties and just hoping for the best, crossing your fingers, then like, yeah, sure. Like then just making a knee-jerk decision, like let's take the property off Airbnb because of what might happen if this happens that I'm speculating will happen in like a year and a half from now. Maybe that's going to happen. So let me just completely change my whole investing strategy. Yeah, of course, like that, that's one way to invest, but it's obviously not an intelligent way to invest. And again, not super shocking that that's the decision that she's made.
Different plan for a number of reasons, and that is to turn it into a long-term rental. That is my plan in 2025. I'm 99% sure at this point that that's what I'm going to do, although I will take the first month or two of the year and see how it is. I'll see if people are still booking, but I just don't think it makes sense. Like, I don't even want to encourage people to pay that much in taxes when they can just go to a hotel. It's going to be cheaper to get a couple hotel rooms for you and your friends.
It's tough to watch because like don't get me wrong, if you have to as a backup plan go over to long-term rental, nothing wrong with that. I think mid-term rentals would make a lot more sense as like an intermediary option. But if you've done your due diligence and you bought a property that is going to cash flow positive as a long-term rental and you have that as a backup plan, that's a phenomenal backup plan. I actually highly recommend it. And if Shelby were like a good investor who'd invested in solid fundamentals and some crazy thing happened in the market that changed it, and she had to go back over to long-term rentals, and she had made sure at the beginning that was going to land her cash flow positive, great. That would actually be phenomenal. But I can virtually guarantee you she never did that due diligence. She didn't run that analysis. She didn't actually crunch the numbers on that when buying the property. And as such, I can virtually guarantee you that she's going to be cash flowing negative on this property as a long-term rental. Heck, she's already cash flowing negative as a short-term rental. So there's virtually no way that she's going to be cash flowing positive as a long-term rental, which is very, very risky, right? If, basically it costs her money every single month to hold on to this property. And then what if things change in the market, like the property value goes down, costs get too high, she loses her income, or she gets a significant income reduction and she can't afford to keep the property, but she can't sell the property because she'll lose money selling it. That's how people really ruin themselves financially. So this is a really, really terrible place to be. Because she hasn't done any of the due diligence, and not to mention all the challenges you're gonna run into with, like, especially being in California, the tenancy laws are like atrocious. They're horrible. If someone just stops paying rent, what's she gonna do, right? She's gonna have to go through a lengthy eviction process. It's gonna be a nightmare. There's gonna be more wear and tear and damage to her property. Oh man, like I can't even. Yeah, that's a lot.
You know, so turning it into a long-term rental makes a lot more sense. You might be like, now why not sell it? Number one reason is because I love this house. I put so much work into it, and I also...
Number one reason is because it's not worth nearly as much as what I bought it for. I couldn't sell it without losing a whole bunch of money.
Love Palm Springs. I could see myself maybe retiring here one day. So I don't want to let go of it when I already have this house and have put so much work into it and have locked in this low interest rate and all this, you know, it just, no, I don't want to sell it. It's not purely an investment to me. I actually would like to use it again. It really just does not make sense to sell financially right now. If I sold it, I would just pay so much in capital gains taxes, and then I would go to buy something and I wouldn't even be able to get anything as good because the interest rates are so high. It doesn't really make sense to sell. But long-term renting it, it turns out, is looking like
She probably wouldn't pay capital gains tax, so she'd probably lose a bunch of money.
it would be quite profitable. Probably more profitable than Airbnb ever was, actually. I actually met one of my neighbors recently, and he told me that he turned his Airbnb into a long-term rental, and he's making more. He's making more because you don't have to pay all the expenses. You don't have to pay for the utilities. Simply Safe, YouTube TV, the insane electric bill, the gas bill. Instead, the tenant pays for what they want and what they use. And the mortgage for my house right now, it's $3,200 a month. And Redfin and Zillow think I could rent this long-term for $6,200 a month.
She's basing that on a Zestimate, guys. She's basing that on Redfin and Zillow, and she's also not taking into account her utilities. She's not taking into account her property taxes. She's not taking into account her property insurance. She's not taking into account any maintenance. Like, oh man, oh, just one bad decision following the next. This is not good.
So to be making $2,000 a month in cash flow, now I'm skeptical if that's actually possible, but we'll see. That would be way better than doing Airbnb.
I mean, come on. That's not cash flow. That's just not what cash flow is. You have other expenses on the property. It's not just your mortgage. You've got your taxes. You've got your insurance. You've got your maintenance. Like, oh man.
Plus, I wouldn't have to deal with all of the hassles that come with running an Airbnb. It's really not that bad, but you do think about it a lot, and there's always stuff.
Oh, great. She put in the caption, and I wouldn't need a property manager. So she's going to go and find the tenant herself, and she's going to deal with all the headaches of that tenant. Like, she's probably not going to screen the tenant because we know she doesn't do her background research. She's probably just going to have someone in there that's going to, like, stay, stop paying rent, do damage to the property. It's going to be hard to get out. Like, come on. Like, this is just be smart. Just like make better choices.
That comes up that you need to be repurchasing, and with a long-term rental there's a lot less of that. Additionally, just on a personal note, my parents live here in Palm Springs now, and my sister and her boyfriend also bought a house here, so I tend to just visit them and stay with them now than even use this house anyway. So I don't really care as much about having it as like a partial use vacation home. So here are my own personal thoughts on this bill, even though nobody asked. I'm gonna give them to you anyway. So this bill is to provide funding for affordable housing for the labor force. And honestly, if it does that and everything works out according to plan, I think that's great. Like, of course, we need more affordable housing, and teachers should be able to afford a house. I think we all agree with that. I think the issue is, I genuinely don't think it's going to do that. California makes a lot of money in taxes to begin with. It's estimated they're gonna bring 130 billion with a B in income taxes alone for 2022. So that's not to mention property taxes, sales tax. So I don't think the issue is funding. I think the money is there to build affordable housing. It's been there. California has always made a ton of money. It's just not ever being spent in the right way.
Our resident economist chiming in.
And I don't want to get too much into this, but like clearly it's not. If we don't have affordable housing now, when we have so much money going to
I mean, frankly, who cares? Like, frankly, like, you know, she's not qualified to speak on this. I'm not qualified to speak on this. Like, who knows? Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter whether the tax actually solves the problem or not. Like, I get it. We want to solve the problem. We want there to be affordable housing, but like, who cares? Like, it just doesn't actually matter. The reality is you made a bad call, you bought a bad property that you shouldn't have bought, and now you're just chasing up one bad decision with the next. She's got this big sunken cost bias where now she owns the property. She's not being forthcoming about like why she's actually doing this. It's not because of some impending tax bill that's going to come a year and a half down the road. Let's be honest. It's because she's losing money. She's barely breaking even managing this thing as a short-term rental. Right? She's not selling it because she loves the property and wants to retire here someday, and she's going to have this big capital gains tax expense if she sells it. She's going to lose money if she sells the property. Like, she probably can't afford to sell it, or if she did, she would take a big financial hit that she doesn't want to take, and she's just letting it be a slow bleed of negative cash flow. Like, she's, and to do this, and then she's projecting for, like, the number one problem was, hey, you didn't run projections, you didn't actually do a proper analysis, you made a bad call without proper due diligence. And now she's making another big call of, I'm going to hold onto the property and do long-term rental with it, and her due diligence starts and ends with mortgage payment, Zestimate. Cool. Like, that's not due diligence. That's not proper analysis. It's just horrible decision making.
To the government here, I personally think it's not fair to put the entire brunt of the lack of affordable housing on short-term rentals when so many things.
A 15% tax is not putting the entire brunt of it on short-term rental. It's a 15% tax. Come on.
It's affected. It's zoning laws. It's the fact that there's no incentives to build, so there's not enough new construction. It's the people who are landlords that own 10 to 100 units. And
look, I agree. I agree with a lot of this stuff, but like, again, who cares? Like, again, at the end of the day, just take it for what it is. We knew that politicians are not going to want to do all the, like, rezoning, like, make these big, huge systemic changes to try to solve the problem. They're going to impose a tax. It's easy to do. They're going to say, look what I did, re-elect me. Great. Politicians always do that. We know that's what happens. So why don't we do our due diligence and research the market that we're investing into to make sure that we're investing into a market that is and will very likely stay friendly to short-term rentals. Like, come on.
Just are hoarding those forever. Like, short-term rentals are a relatively new thing, and we've had an affordable housing problem long before short-term rentals. I think some people think that if everybody quits Airbnb, suddenly housing is going to be affordable, but it's not, because there's so many things that affect the housing market. I think what we're actually going to see happen is the city's going to bring in less revenue. There's going to be probably less Airbnbs. The reality of Palm Springs, and a lot of people don't want to hear this, but this is the truth about Palm Springs. Most of these homes are second houses. They're second houses for rich people. They're used for a few months of the year, and then the people who own them go back to Canada or Chicago or wherever they came from. It would be great if they can build more affordable housing, but I want to see the plan of how they're going to do it. There is no plan. I looked through the whole bill. There's no specific plans of how they're going to spend the money. I even reached out to the office of the senator that wrote it to interview her about it. They seemed interested actually in an interview, but then they ended up not responding. At this point, I can't actually tell if this thing has passed or not. I'm not here to convince you to vote on anything, because this actually isn't a bill that we as citizens can vote on. All in all, I don't love this bill. Of course, I'm biased as a short-term rental owner, but I also think it's just going to discourage people from traveling to Palm Springs. A lot of my guests are from out of state. They're from places that are really cold. Chicago, Oregon, Canada. And if they're having to pay 26% in taxes for a house, I actually think they might go to Florida or something. Let's be real, California probably already has the money for affordable housing. They just never allocate it to that. A reality, whichever comes first. Hopefully affordable housing. In Texas, they are throwing up new houses all the time because it's easier to. And if they made it a little bit easier to here, streamline the permit process, make it faster, easier, cheaper to build, then it's just simple supply and demand. There would be a lot more houses.
Okay, pop quiz. What's gonna be a better bet to make? Should we go and invest in a market like Texas, where they set up all the systems, the zoning, the regulations are all more favorable for short-term rental investors? Or should we invest in California and hope that they change all of their political systems? What's the path of least resistance here? Like, again, I get it, I agree, but it's the wrong conclusion. Like, sure, you can make a YouTube video and talk about how you don't agree with the political decisions being made. Is that going to change them? No. Right? But you as an investor, you had the decision. Like, you had the choice. You could invest in California, or you could invest in Texas. The reality is you made a bad decision. You made a bad call, right? And so to then go and say, well, now it's the government's fault that I made this. No, it's not. Like, you knew what you were getting into, or if you didn't, it was because you chose ignorance. You chose not to actually do your due diligence and think this stuff through ahead of time. So I think, again, the big takeaway here for everyone watching is to do your due diligence, right? To just actually look into regulations, look into the market that you're investing in, invest in short-term rental friendly locations, and buy properties that actually make sense as short-term rental properties. If you are worried about it and you want a good backup plan, it is definitely smart to have a backup plan. Analyze the numbers on it ahead of time so you don't get stuck with a property that's not worth as much as you bought it for, can't cash flow, and then you're relying on like a Zestimate and your mortgage bill to try to see, is this thing going to cash flow positive as a long-term rental? Big surprise, I virtually guarantee you that it's not. Like, the numbers just aren't going to add up. It's not going to make any sense. So that's my thoughts. As always, let me know yours in the comment section down below. If you thought this video was valuable or helpful, if you learned something not to do today, then make sure you hit the like button down below this video and give it a thumbs up. And last but not least, if you are new here to the channel or you're not yet subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well. We post 2 new videos every single week, sharing about all things Airbnb management, investing, hosting. So make sure you subscribe so you can stay up to date with that. With all that said, thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.